Hello, my name is Aaron Lakota. I'm here at Jerry's Music Shop in South Hadley, Massachusetts. In this video, we're going to show you some general care and maintenance of the instrument. First step is after you finish playing for the session, you're going to want to swab the instrument out. There's several different types of swabs that you can use. Some people use feathers. Some people will use a general pull-through swab like this one. This is a rather large swab. But with smaller swabs, you want to make sure that you don't get them stuck in the instrument. That's a big problem if you do get them stuck in the instrument. So with this specific swab, you'll notice that you have one end that has a string with generally they're made out of metal, but sometimes you'll see plastic ends. So what you want to do is, so you can do this with the instrument together or apart, but when it's together you want to make sure that you don't pull the swab all the way through the instrument. So I'll show you my process for this. What I do is I turn the instrument all the way upside down and I insert the swab through the bell. Once this end comes out the other end of the instrument, you're just going to start pulling it lightly. Once you feel that it's a little bit tight, you want to stop. Okay, so just to this point. I could pull it further, but I'm not going to. At that point, I'm going to tip the instrument back over. I'm just going to pull the swab out a little bit, and then I'm going to pull it back in again. Again, make sure you don't pull it too tight. Now I have a different sort of swab here. This is a little bit smaller, so you'll notice that this has a string on both ends. It's called a ripcord. So same thing with this swab. You're just going to insert the metal end or the plastic end through this end of the instrument, the bell of the instrument, and you're just going to pull. And even though it has the ripcord, you don't want to pull this swab all the way through. So again, just pull it until it's tight, pull back. Now something that is very important is you want to make sure that there are no knots in the swab. So make sure you look at the swab and that there's no knots in either string end of the swab. What can happen is, if there are knots, this can get stuck into the instrument here, and you have to get that professionally removed, and that can be a big problem. If you prefer to swab the instrument while it's apart, you're going to remove the top joint and set the rest of the instrument aside. Now take your swab, and you're going to insert it into the bottom section of the head joint. And again, you're just going to pull it until it's tight. Never pull the swab all the way through the instrument. And with the bottom section of the oboe, you could do it with the bell still on. That's how I prefer to do it. You're just going to, again, insert the metal side of the swab through the instrument and pull it. Now when you have this bottom section apart, you can pull the swab all the way through this section without worry of it getting stuck. And as a last step that I like to do, I will just take the swab and run it on the inside of the bell to make sure that there's no moisture in there. The next important step in general maintenance, beginning maintenance of the instrument, is making sure that your tenon corks are nice and well lubricated. So you'll notice that the bottom and middle joint are both cork tenon. So they have a little tenon, which is this post coming out that is inserted into the rest of the instrument, and they're covered with cork. So these should move fairly freely. This is actually a good example of how they should move. So it's a smooth action. I'm not pushing too much pressure on it, and they're moving freely. So if you feel like you have to force this at all, you need to grease the tenon. So to grease the tenons, you want to take your cork grease, and I'm just going to set my oboe down for a second. And this works just like chapstick, and you just turn the end, and it will bring out a little bit of the cork grease. So this one you can rub right onto the cork grease. I actually still prefer to take a little bit in my finger, and you're just going to rub that onto the cork, all the way around it. You don't need a lot. Now if you were to use it as chapstick, you just take a little bit here. Again, not coating it, just putting a little bit on it, and then you're just going to work it into the cork. Now, like the tenons of the instrument, the reed also has a cork around it. So if the reed isn't going into the socket of the instrument very easily, you can just do the same process as you did with the tenons. So if you just take a little bit of cork grease on your finger, and you're just going to rub that around the cork. The reed should go into the instrument fairly easily. Many beginner instruments are made out of plastic, but as you get more into the realm of professional instruments, they begin being made out of wood. You have to take some further steps to ensure that they're well maintained. So the wood will crack. Sometimes in the beginning of the life of an instrument, it will crack for apparently no reason. That's not to be necessarily concerned about if that does happen. Just make sure that you get it repaired right away. So to ensure that the instrument doesn't crack, you need to make sure that it's well humidified within the case. There's a few ways you could do that. You can purchase a small humidifier or damp it from a local music store. Or I prefer to use orange peels. Now, like the humidifier, the orange peel just has a certain amount of humidity within it, and that humidity is released within the case over time. The oboe has a tendency to collect moisture just like any other wind instrument. If this happens, you'll hear a gurgling noise in the keys. So oftentimes this will happen in the octave keys. So you have the second octave key up here and the first octave key. It'll make the higher octaves have sort of a gurgly or even raucous sort of noise to them. So if it's in the second octave key, what you're going to do is just put the moisture removal paper under that. And what I like to do is I'll cover the bottom of the top joint, and I'll cover all the keys, and I'll blow through the top, and then hit the second octave key. When you take the paper out, you should notice a little wet spot on the paper. If it's in the first octave key, you're just going to do the same process. Instead of hitting the second octave key, you just want to make sure you hit the first octave key. So sometimes you'll get it in one of these keys. Something to note is that it will, if the moisture is in the one of these keys, it will make the note above the key that it's in gurgle. Okay, so that's to say, if it's in the A key, the B will gurgle when you play it. Okay, so what's happening is the air is coming out of here and hitting that moisture and making it gurgle. So if that happens, you just put it under the key. So if the B is gurgling, put it under the A key. And you're just going to cover the instrument again, like you did with the octave keys. And you're just going to lift whatever key is gurgling. Finally, the reed is a part of the instrument that requires the most care and maintenance. Please see the video on reeds for more detail on that.